Welcome to the Generation Open podcast with LDR21, a podcast about workplace culture and leadership that leads to transparency and an open organization. Today, we are proud to welcome Aaron Atkins, the talent acquisition leader for Slalom Consulting. Here's your host, the founder and CEO of LDR21, Jen Kelchner.
So I want to welcome everybody today to our conversation with Aaron Atkins. Aaron, I'm so pleased to have the chance to talk to you about current challenges we're seeing in the industry around talent acquisition, recruitment, engagement, kind of how those go hand in hand. And then hopefully some possible solutions will come out of our conversation for our listeners to be able to look at today to see how they can implement them in their own organizations. So thank you again for being here with us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jen. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. So, Aaron, for those that are just jumping into our conversation, you are a talent acquisition leader with Slalom Consulting, based out of the Los Angeles area. And so, with your background, because obviously you've seen a lot in the consulting world, but with your background there, what are some of the current challenges we believe organizations are facing today with talent acquisition?
I think, from a larger perspective, but also specifically speaking from mine on a day-to-day basis from Slalom, the single largest challenge we face is how do we continue to scale up and grow without sacrificing quality. So from a real world example, I've been with Slalom coming up on 6 years now. When I joined, there were 9 offices. I think we had 1,100 consultants. There's now 4,200 of us in 25 offices. And while the growth has been exciting and fun and getting to meet a bunch of new people and hearing what drives individuals, and I love it, it's very exciting, but where the struggle is how do we continue to not only grow at 25% year over year, but how do we not sacrifice the quality? So again, in a real sense, I think our firm hires about 4% of the people that we talk to. So what are we doing from a talent leader perspective to identify the right level of talent? And how are we coaching them through our process and continuing to grow and keeping that level of quality at the highest it possibly can without, cutting corners here to fill a client need just because, we need to deliver this work. So maybe we'll hire Sarah and Mike when maybe they're not A players. So that's something we face on a day-to-day basis. It's very hard, but it's very challenging and exciting. So it's not only is it, going out and speaking with younger folks, then also kind of relaying their messages of what their insights are. If it's millennials, if it's even now the Generation Z of what they drive value in, and how do we communicate that back to our leadership team internally to make sure that we're creating a holistic candidate experience, as well as continuing to satisfy our client demands. But the number one problem, the biggest challenge I face is how do we grow and scale without sacrificing quality?
Right. So it's interesting because I think a lot of people are faced with that question of the scaling and growth and not sacrificing quality, although I'm sure they phrase it different ways. And so I've recently heard, as I'm interested in your opinion, about hiring for a culture fit is maybe not an appropriate way to phrase it any longer. So yes, we're trying to hire for a culture, but it's really something that goes deeper than that. Right. You have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So culture fit is something that is kind of this nebulous term that, is worth billions and billions of dollars. But what does it mean? That's something that, if I identify someone doesn't have a quote culture fit, what does it actually mean? If we look at one of the leaders in our space in recruiting, McKinsey, obviously a world-class talent leader and recruiter and consulting firm, what they're excellent at is coaching back folks that they don't hire. So if I interview and you're the hiring manager, Jen, and you don't want to hire me, what are the specific attributes that you did not see? And where can I improve and make changes so that I come back to you? So at Slalom, we're tending to get away from culture fit and instead more focus on capabilities and skill set. So if it is something like, we interview someone and they lack critical thinking, we will ask the right level of questions and scenarios and understand so that we know that individual can think critically versus, well, Aaron's not smart, Aaron's not a culture fit. So this culture fit term is something we're attempting to move towards and away from, to instead identify people that, can do the role, but also folks that can add value in other aspects. But it's a very innocuous, very big term, and it can be difficult to identify, but it is something that we at Slalom are attempting to move away from because it's bitten us. I can give you plenty of examples before of people that we've talked to that we say they're not culture fits, and you attempt to close the loop with them in a cordial, respectful manner. And sometimes it doesn't go well because it's not, you ask me a question 2 + 2 and I say 3.5, and if that's a wrong answer, and you can identify that versus you're not a culture fit, it's too large of a term. So what are we doing? What kind of questions are we asking? And then what kind of coaching are we subsequently giving back to the candidate to identify that skill gap? And then how can they improve upon it so that in the future, they can eventually become part of our firm?
I love that too. I mean, I think it's a win-win for everybody. Whether they cycle back to you or don't, at least you know that they have very accurate information that they can go and work on their skills or whatever that item is, right? And be able to be beneficial.
Right. And it's kind of the karma aspect, something in the sense that, in the recruiting industry, you talk to thousands of people a year. Is everybody going to be a fit for your organization? No. But in the kind of the spirit of doing what is right, if you meet someone that's great and you uncover another opportunity where they're strong for, pay it forward, introduce them to that leader or give them specific, coaching and collaboration and maybe identify a couple of different opportunities where they can improve, because you never know when it's going to come back to you, hopefully in a beneficial manner.
It's that big law of reciprocity.
It is.
I love it. Love it. So one of the other challenges I've recently heard from others in somewhat in your industry or variations of it is their struggle has been in placing people in organizations just because of the cycle has been a little lengthy, and they feel like they're losing potentially quality candidates that would be a good fit for an organization because the organization's kind of sitting on their decisions. And I don't know that that's something Slalom struggles with, but I am curious from your point of view in recruiting, if you've seen that before, heard about it. Is it something organizations are still working on and kind of speeding it up?
So if you want it for grins, if you look at Glassdoor, the number one complaint, if you will, about our organization is that our recruiting process is too long. That is by far and away the number one. Now, we like to say that, we used to be it's like an art and a science. So if we identify someone, say, for example, a technical person, if you're a software engineer that's well qualified, that's a great person, if you put your resume up on LinkedIn, you've got 10 job offers by the time you even check your email the next time. So when we're talking to talent that is active, that is in demand, extremely volatile, extremely high oriented individuals, what are we doing to shorten that process to become more efficient, but then also allow them to have the right amount of conversations that they would need so they can make the right investment? Because we tend to not hire people for jobs. I want to hire you for a career. Our retention is incredibly high. Our turnover is very low. And we do that because in the recruiting process, we can have the right amount of conversations for those folks to be comfortable, taking that leap of faith and joining a new firm. But that's kind of the science of it, that's the art of it. But the science of it is, how do we make that as efficient as possible? So if it's a technical person, if you were interviewing someone for 2 weeks, that's too long. It should be shorter than that. On the flip side, if we're talking to senior executives, it might take a couple of months. It could even take a couple of years to identify that right person. But certainly to your point, especially amongst, well-qualified individuals, and if you look larger from a macroeconomic perspective, where unemployment is under 5%. If you look in technology, unemployment, I think, is even under 2%. Out here in California, the state unemployment is under 5%, specifically also as well in technology. So just the sheer amount of supply is rather tight given the amount of demand. So what are we doing to differentiate, to identify the right people, have the level of conversations needed, but also be as efficient as possible? Because if I'm sitting on an opportunity that we can't close, but I've got a great person that I can't hire, what's to stop he or she from taking another opportunity? And then we as the organization are missing out on them making an impact here in our community.
Yeah.
So that is a great problem and one that we address on a day-to-day basis, but that, creating that recruiting and candidate experience that is timely, efficient, but also collaborative, so that our folks that we talk to know what they're getting into and the business side knows enough about them to make an informed decision. But it's something that we face on a day-to-day battle here.
So that really helped me think about it differently. While I understand a lot more on the more senior experienced individual or that executive level, it is traditionally been a long cycle for a reason. There are a lot of, like you said, it's that would be a big move for somebody at that level. It is part of a career at that point. It's not an early entry point in a career. And so therefore there are a lot of factors at play that would extend that cycle versus either more of an entry level role or, like you said, a tech space or something like that that's requiring a very different skill set. But I guess now we really are at a point in time where there are those factors of it is that whole supply and demand. It's the access to the qualified individual. It is hiring for we're not going to say culture fit anymore, but that unique person that has the right skills and right capabilities for a company. But what I do like about what you just said is all of your art to it is really basing it on relationship and curating relationships that, over time would pay out in other ways, even if it's not an immediate fit, really curating that space for the long term of a career. And I think maybe that's where some people miss the point, is that they're only thinking it's an immediate need. I have a pain point here. Let me fill for the pain point and let's just move on. But as you and I both know, doing it that way can often be far more costly than having a position open for a period of time.
You're right. And that's kind of something I think that I think Slalom does well as an organization, is while we certainly have times where we want to be transactional and it's, getting things done in an efficient manner, we've always tended to err more towards the relationship oriented. Because to your point, if we make that bad hire and a project goes sideways, we're losing revenue. And not only do we maybe have to let that person go, and then maybe they share bad words about our company because they didn't have a good experience, but we then have at risk a client that maybe doesn't want to use our services again, which again is additional kind of lost revenue. So it really does come back to building a trusted relationship, not only with our folks internally, but also externally, to make sure that it all comes together in a collaborative environment.
Absolutely. So in that vein, I'm going to kind of bring up another hot topic these days around diversity and inclusion. Specifically, I think for me, this is me lately thinking about diversity and inclusion outside of the normal context that corporately we've been, having committees and such to make sure that we're meeting demands, but really want to push that to talk about more inclusivity. So it's diversity of thought, backgrounds, and education. What are we seeing now as either being asked for to fill out that space more in terms of diversity and inclusion with hiring, or what kind of trends are we hearing about that we need to be aware of?
Yeah, so I think there's kind of two sides of the I&D topic. One, there is the religion, gender, orientation, physical kind of background of it. But there's also, even more so, there's a thought leadership perspective. I think Slalom does a really good job of encapsulating both sides of the aisle, so to speak, to create an organization that strives to be dynamic and inclusive and diverse as opposed to homogenized. We hire a lot out of the big consulting firms, and they're amazing organizations. But when we create teams, we don't want to have a team of 10 people all from the same consulting firm. We want to have people from different walks of life, different backgrounds, different ideations, so that we can kind of come together and create a unique decision. So when we look at kind of thought leadership, we want to ask people and understand what they're passionate about. Is it something where you want to make an impact environmentally? Is it something where you want to get back from a community service perspective? Do you have your own passion project because a friend or a family member of yours maybe was sick and it caused an impact on your life? Or if there is something where you want to get involved from a technical perspective, or you want to learn a new delivery methodology, or you want to challenge and kind of shake up the status quo, those are the types of folks that we want to bring in, because they're not happy kind of staying in their lanes. We want people to come in and kind of shake it up. Now, stay between the guardrails, don't run outside of the road, but we tend to move away from just kind of staying in your lanes, because in those types of organization, they tend to be a bit more stoic and archaic. And that's not the type of company we have. So that's from a thought leadership perspective. In addition, kind of what are the things that we're seeing from a trends perspective? The rise of affinity groups is something that we put a significant amount of investment in over the years, and we're starting to see some really great results. So if it is from, a religious perspective. It is from a veterans perspective, a gay, lesbian, and allied perspective, a diversity, women's leadership. There are about 5 major groups that Slalom has built and expanded out, and we're seeing really, really good results. Our biggest group is probably our women's leadership network. That was something we started back in 2012 out of Seattle by one of our senior leaders, Gila. She's now one of our general managers leading most of that market. But it was a really interesting group. And I love how she created this amazing national organization that inspires female leaders to make their voice heard and to push forward and to go on. But her goal, which is unique, is to make her group obsolete, because she doesn't want to have a female leadership group, because there shouldn't be any differences between a male and a female. So it's fascinating to kind of hear her mindset and to see some of these things come to fruition. In that same vein, when you kind of start talking about inclusion and diversity, that kind of leads us to even towards work-life balance, which I think we'll probably talk about later, and how, we want to get away from even saying work-life balance. It's just life. It's not work or life. It's, how does it all kind of come together? So from an inclusion perspective, that's something that I think Slalom has done a really great job of pushing forward, and also from a thought leadership and a diversity, because we don't want to be a homogenized place where everyone is the same, because we can't create unique thoughts, unique structures, unique client deliverables, and unique people if everybody is a right-handed male from South Carolina. We were a right-handed male from Southern California, or a left-handed person from Arizona. We want different people because they're going to push each other to create something unique.
Absolutely. And we're big supporters of that as well, because seeing that in open environments, collaboration cannot exist just because, the people around the table are your buddies. Obviously we all enjoy having good coworkers, but it's more than that. It has to be that diversity of thought in order to produce innovation, and that level of creativity that solves, huge problems. This is what we should be doing for our clients. As well as, I think, creating new spaces. And I also appreciate where you brought in, the use of these individual groups that you've put together in these networks, where really the solution there isn't just about bringing people together and awareness and what are we doing, but it's about pushing past that to where it no longer exists. Because I think that's I think that's a goal of mine as well, is to see where those walls are completely down, and it's no longer a them versus us mentality, no matter what bucket you're trying to break through or box, but it really is about all of us being in, and taking it past awareness and actually creating a solution of it is no more.
Right. But as as someone that's been in the game, a while, like you've seen this, you've worked in large organizations, that change, that paradigm shift, while elementary in nature, is extraordinarily difficult. And it requires, I think some people raising their hand, stepping up and taking that risk. And then, to Gila's point, she was very nervous about even creating the Women's Leadership Network. She was afraid to ask. And the response was, well, of course, go for it. Why would you even hesitate? But again, that cultural change is a fair amount of work. It can be some pretty honest, pretty difficult discussions. But to your point, open cultures, open organizations need to be comfortable having those conversations, and they need to encourage them as well.
Join us in the next episode, where we will continue our discussion with Aaron Atkins about talent acquisition. Thanks for listening to the Generation Open podcast with Leader21. If you would like to find out more about how to improve the health of your organization, or would like information on our Rapid Change program, go to our website, leader21.com. That's LDR21.com.